Hello everyone and welcome to Guild Wars 2 Daily. Today we are going to be talking about lore, and the footage in the background is once again not from me. I had a really good response from everyone at the end of the last episode. A lot of people sent me personal messages and comments about using their footage. So I've actually got a list now of about 11 different channels on YouTube of people who have said, hey, you can use any of my stuff, which is really good. So hopefully I can just get a selection from a lot of you guys there. Today it's someone called Cross Harry who's got a few videos of some of the jumping puzzle stuff in the char areas, which is kind of cool, and depending on how long this video goes along, I might also put on some PvP that he's put up as well. So this is kind of how Guild Wars 2 Daily is going to be going from now on. I will sometimes use the bigger guys, of course, but yeah, I think it'd be quite fun to use a lot of the community videos at this point, and there's certainly quite a lot, so that should be quite cool. And yeah, just before we get started talking about the lore though, one thing that really I wanted to mention from last episode that I didn't talk about, because honestly I had no idea. We had a question about FPS lag and how the game didn't seem to run as well as a lot of people expected it to. Now, my comment on the matter was that it's not optimized at all, and by the time the release comes it should certainly be optimized much better, and we should expect things to run far smoother. But I did also say that maybe when the game launches it will have slightly higher requirements than perhaps we first thought. Now, a lot of people did tell me that apparently the reason why it was so poorly optimized right now is really twofold, and it's to do with your CPU. I won't bog the video down too much with this, but apparently first of all, most of the processing for the game was being done by your CPU. It was pretty much ignoring your graphics card, which obviously has a big impact, and that'll be something that's changed obviously as development goes along. And the other thing was it was bottlenecked to using just one core of your CPU as well, so it was all trying to run off of your CPU and it wasn't even using the full power of it or your full potential. So those were really the two main reasons why FPS might have been lower than we could have been expecting. But once again, I have to re-say these are the things that are going to be fixed as the game continues along its way through development. Optimization like this will occur far later, but that's the main reason if anyone was curious. And yeah, a lot of people mentioned that, so I thought I'd say it on the video for those of you who weren't quite aware. But yeah, so let's talk about lore. I'm going to open it up with a quick question today from someone called Burning Sticks, who asked simply, is there lions in Guild Wars, considering Lion's Arch? A really short question that is actually very easy to answer. Yes, there are lions in the lore, but there are no lions around Kryta or Lion's Arch. That's kind of the interesting thing. There are lions, but they're in Elona. They're in the more African continent, and they're available as a pet that you can get, and there are various quests to do with the lions there. However, in Kryta, we have this big place that was originally the capital of Kryta. Obviously, come Guild Wars 2, it's not that anymore. It's like its own free state built by pirates, but it's still called Lion's Arch, and you might be thinking, well, what the hell's the relevance there? Well, there are two things really we can talk about here. First is that Kryta actually, when it was established, it was a colony of the Elonians. It was actually owned by Elonians. So basically the passage of humanity over Tyria, they started in Cantha when they were put there by the gods, someplace further south than Cantha in fact that we haven't even seen, and slowly they worked their way north. They went to Elona and then they went up to Kryta. So this could be why it's Lion's Arch, because that influence, like that African influence that comes from Elona, somehow seeped in there, and that's why it's called Lion's Arch. But there's also the possibility that lions did once live around there. I mean, Kryta itself, you wouldn't tell so much from Guild Wars 2 since it looks far more like a traditional kind of fantasy setting. But at least in Guild Wars 1, it was a very tropical area. That was kind of the feel of the place. So I could imagine lions at one point maybe lived there, but that's all just big speculation. There's never really been confirmed to have any lions up there in Kryta. But it is curious why that name is like that. And of course, there are big lions, big statues of lions all over Lion's Arch. And these were obviously made with relation to the name, but maybe, you know, if people were actually sculpting things after these lions, perhaps there's more significance there that we don't actually know at this point. Is it possible that the statues were there first and it was named Lion's Arch because of them? I mean, that's a possibility, but then you look at Guild Wars 2 Lion's Arch and there are still the original lion statues there underwater, but a lot of them now are like mermaid lions, like they are half lion, half mermaid, like they've got that like fish tail going on. So they've obviously been remade, and why are they still sticking with the lion idea? Is there more here? When you're in the Maguma jungle, there's a quest where you talk to one of the druids of the jungle, who are like a mysterious kind of fallen race that some people think have got something to do with the Sylvari. But you can speak to one of these druids in the jungle, and they kind of give you this prophecy about future events to come. And in this prophecy is the line, lions versus the bird. Now, a lot of us think that this line refers to the birds are the Masat, and the lions are the Krytans, or the humans. So it's quite interesting that even that druid has got some kind of prophecy that refers to humanity, at least in Kryta, as lions, which is very, very curious, and I'm wondering if there is something more with the lions. So this is only a quick question, because there's a very simple answer. Yes, there are lions in the Guild Wars universe. Why Lion's Arch is named Lion's Arch, though? Very interesting question, and you could take it in a lot of different directions, but right now, we don't know, and I wonder whether we ever really will know. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing ArenaNet might go back to and explain, but I'd quite like to know. And while we're at it, Lion's Arch, what exactly is the arch in this question? Because there's no real arches in the place, either in Guild Wars 1 or Guild Wars 2. But yeah, the next question was asked by Capone3830, who said, regarding lore, you said that the reason for the Elder Dragons to fare war against Tyria is that they're simply evil and can't really think. If that's the case, why do their champions, who seem to be able to think properly, follow them if the dragons have no ideals, useful thing they to do? Okay, kind of butchered it at the end there. But yeah, so why are the champions of these Elder Dragons actually somehow intelligent? And I guess I'm kind of answering this question to further define how we talk about the Elder Dragons. I don't think it's not that they can't think. We've heard of them as hungry forces, ever hungry, and the more they consume, the more that they want to consume, and they want destruction. So even though we can't really identify with them thinking in any manner appreciable to us, we can see that they have motives, and to that end, that's why I think it does make sense that they have perhaps more intelligent creatures below them that can think intelligently but also work towards the same aims. These Elder Dragons aren't entirely mindless in that they have no purpose and they just destroy things collaterally. It's more that they want to destroy, and they have this hunger, and they want to consume everything on Tyria, essentially life on Tyria, as far as we can gather. Perhaps more than that, but we're not 100% sure. So when we talk about the champions, I suppose, since these are kind of spawns, we're not even sure how these things are created by the Elder Dragons, but since these things come into being because of the Elder Dragons, I suppose, in my mind, it's easy for me to rationalize it and say that these champions and all the things below it have the same motives as the Elder Dragons. It's just that they've got slightly more intelligence to actually bring about these means. So they are allied with each other for that reason. It's not that a champion is necessarily born and then just decides off the bat, oh, I've got nothing to do with this Elder Dragon. They are working towards the same thing. Though, of course, in Glint's case, and possibly Kunavang's as well, if she turns out to be a champion, we have seen that they can develop a mind of their own, and they can decide that they don't agree with the Elder Dragon any longer, and they can rebel against that Elder Dragon. So maybe that explains it a little bit better, but I think that the actual motives behind the Elder Dragons has been deliberately shrouded in mystery like this, so that we can't be 100% sure right now why they are so hungry, why they want to destroy, and that's either for two reasons. One, ArenaNet can use it as a cop-out, so they don't have to develop a really convincing nemesis or enemy character within the universe. They might be using it for that, or so that at a later date they can go back, when we get to Ore, perhaps we'll have all these revelations and find out the true motives behind the Elder Dragons, or maybe even find that something's pulling their strings and they're just puppets of something else. I mean, that's certainly a plot that they did a lot of in Guild Wars 1, where everything ended up being a result of Abaddon. Would they go back to that? Well, possibly. It is still on the table right now, but I think for now they definitely have tried to make the Elder Dragons in some ways be a bit of an enigma, where we don't know enough about what they're trying to do or how they're specifically structured, but we do know these strands that I'm hoping when we get in game we'll kind of weave together and make a really nice picture. So, on the topic of where humans came from the first question, here's another one from Swordsman1600, who said, here's one that's been on my mind. We know that humans were brought to Tyria by the gods, but are the humans the only species in Tyria that were brought from elsewhere? It may be specifically stated that humans were brought, but it seems like any known species could have been brought. For example, just because the dwarves were on Tyria long before the humans were, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are native to Tyria. Which is an interesting thought, that any of the races we know at the moment could have come from somewhere else, and you can take that quite far and start saying, well, what if all the races were from somewhere else, and nothing was born naturally onto Tyria? I mean, that's a very interesting thought. But the truth is, there's only one other race we know of, other than the humans, that were brought to Tyria in the same manner. And these guys were the Forgotten. Now, we've mentioned them a few times, but their name is quite fitting. The most I've really mentioned them on Guild Wars 2 Daily at the moment is that they seem to have no role to play in Guild Wars 2. We've seen nothing about them, heard nothing about them. So it's quite interesting to think where their race has gone. Has their race now left Tyria, as they were once brought to Tyria? But the Forgotten, I can use this as an opportunity to tell you guys about the race. Essentially, they were brought to Tyria at a very specific date that we can work out exactly. Apparently it was the year 1769 before the Exodus, so this is quite possibly before the humans came to Tyria. In fact, it seems very likely this was before the humans came to Tyria. They were placed on Tyria by the 6 gods, and they were placed there, supposedly, to be as a kind of guide for all of the other races, so that they would watch over the other races and make sure the other races never destroyed the planet and that they settled into the planet just fine. Now, you might ask, well, why have the gods placed a race on here to see over the other races in that capacity if those races already exist and seem to be existing just fine at that point? Well, there could be a few reasons for that. There could, number one, be that the gods were responsible for bringing a lot more races, and the Forgotten were supposed to look over those races that were also new to Tyria. It could be that, or it could be that when the gods found Tyria, it was in a wreck, a complete state, because it had just gone through a previous awakening of the Elder Dragons, and a lot of races were in serious trouble at that point. Or it could have been another reason that we don't know right now. But in any case, they brought the Forgotten to Tyria to watch over the world while they shaped it and formed it under their image, which, as we know, this is what the gods did when they found Tyria. They didn't create Tyria, but they did shape it and mold it to their liking. Now, at that time, the Forgotten were all over Tyria, and we've heard about them like being at war with other races, particularly the Char, but slowly they got pushed away. The other races started fighting them too much, and in particular the humans. It's said that the humans, once the humans made it onto Tyria, they warred with the Forgotten a lot, and the Forgotten essentially lost their purpose and decided that they didn't want to be involved with the affairs of other races anymore, and they retreated to a desolate area of the world, the Crystal Desert, or at the time possibly the Crystal Sea. So they went to a place where they wouldn't be bothered by the other races anymore. When the war happened between the gods and Abaddon, when they all shut him down, they aided the gods in their fight against Abaddon, and once he was imprisoned in the Realm of Torment, they also remained in the Realm of Torment to watch over that realm as well. They obviously didn't do a very good job, because eventually Abaddon pretty much regained all control over there and turned his prison into his home, but in any case, the Forgotten were helping there as well. When all that stuff happened, as you may know, the Crystal Sea became the Crystal Desert, and that's kind of just where the Forgotten settled. Their actual name of the race at this point, this is when it was forgotten, quite literally. That's why they're called the Forgotten, because nobody really remembers who they were anymore, and no one could really go to interact with them because the Crystal Desert itself would kill people off if they went there, if not the Forgotten themselves. While they were in the desert, this is when they looked to a new master. They actually looked to Glint, who was also in the desert, and they began to serve her rather than gods. The gods had left at this point, of course, because of the Exodus, and that's kind of just the role that the Forgotten were playing from that point onwards. During the plot of prophecies, you do eventually go to the Crystal Desert to become ascended, and it's there that you meet the Forgotten, and you meet them once again in the Realm of Torment. But when Nightfall ends and you defeat Abaddon and the gods decide to leave completely, we don't really hear anything about the Forgotten from that point. So I guess the idea is that the Forgotten were just sticking around waiting for the conclusion of that whole thing with Abaddon, and once Cormyr rose to become a god, they just seem to have disappeared from Tyria. Maybe the gods have decided the Forgotten have fulfilled their purpose at this point, and now they're leaving Tyria once again to perhaps go somewhere else or back to wherever they came from. And it leads to Guild Wars 2 250 years further down the line, where we haven't heard, not in any interviews, not in any blog posts, not anything in-game, nothing about the Forgotten. They literally seem like this race that had a role to play in early Tyria as far as the gods are concerned, and then they've completely faded away now. And like their name, they're going to be forgotten unless something actually happens. I mean, it does seem like we'll be able to go back to the Crystal Desert at some point come Guild Wars 2, so maybe when we go there we'll find there are some Forgotten left, but at the moment we haven't seen or heard of any, not for a very long time. But yeah, so that's the other race that we know of that was brought to the world by the gods. There could be more, but the humans and the Forgotten so far are our only examples. Oh yeah, and did I mention that the Forgotten are snake people? Yeah, I should probably say that as well, they're snakes. But yeah, there you go guys, thanks very much for watching Guild Wars 2 Daily. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and thanks again to Cross Harry for the footage in the background. I guess I'll see you guys tomorrow. See you later.